So, welcome to another episode of the Hack My Age podcast. I think we're in May for the release of this recording. We're recording in March. We're kind of ahead, but I'm going to predict that by May, our biohacking menopause membership group is continuing to thrive. And I'm not sure who we have as a giveaway, but I have a feeling it's going to be really good, whatever it is. Probably just go to my Instagram or Facebook and you see I posted it there and you'll find out what it's all about because we have giveaways, we have Q&As, we have people who come in and share so much information and advice. It's such a safe place. I really know that you're going to love it. So if you're on the fence, join us now. The price is going to go up. Haven't decided when yet. Maybe by May it'll already gone up, but let's see. Hopefully not. And if not, well, very, very close. So I want to introduce our next podcast guest. You're going to meet for the second time Carol Petersen. And she's a compounding pharmacist. She's got decades of experience helping patients, helping them improve their quality of life, very often through bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And we first had her on the podcast on January 15th, 2024, just at the beginning of the year. And now we're already in May. My gosh, time is flying. And in that episode, she really gave her honest and unbiased opinion on testing. She has no interest and no vested interest in any kind of testing company. So it was really good to hear her opinion. And it was mind blowing what she said. So the link to that episode is in the show notes. You've got to listen to it. But today I circled back to that episode to really wrap it up in a bow for you and reiterate her most important points. And then we got into the nitty gritty of what happens behind the scenes in those compounding pharmacies. In that world, my gosh, is very interesting. And remember, she is a pharmacist, so maybe a little biased here. But if what she says is true, then it gives you a really good view on the differences among the compounding formulas of hormones that are made in a laboratory just for you, those tailor-made things. And then there's she talks about the differences between that and the FDA approved pharmaceutical grade hormones. And then she's going to talk to you about the hormones that you can buy on Amazon or on a website or from an influencer. So she breaks it all down. And I promise you, you're going to learn something new and probably very surprising. And just to give you a little bit more of a background on Carol, she graduated from the University of Wisconsin School of Pharmacy, and she's also a certified nutritional practitioner. And she's super passionate about optimizing health. And I mean, really optimizing it so that you are 100% satisfied with your health. And she is associated with several medical organizations like the International College of Integrative Medicine and the American College of Apothecaries, the American Pharmacists Association, and the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding. She's pretty busy. She's also the founder and first chair for the Compounding Special Interest Group with the American Pharmacists Association. And she is the chair for the Integrative Medicine Consortium. And I was really curious about that one. So I had to look it up because there's just so many. And I wanted to know more about it. And the IMC, that Integrative Medicine Consortium, it's pretty cool. It says its mission statement is to make integrative medicine the standard of care. Wouldn't that be amazing? And she also, interestingly enough, co-hosts a radio program called Take Charge of Your Health, and it airs in the greater New York area. And it doesn't stop there. She keeps going on. She's also on the medical advisory board for the Center for Menstrual Cycle and Ovulation Research. This is one busy lady on the lookout for us women and our women's health. And so she's been in this world of hormones and integrative medicine and pharmaceuticals for a very long time. She's been to hundreds of complementary medicine conferences. She reads and researches a ton of books, scientific papers, and it really shows. She cites papers and research just off the top of her head. She co-owns also an alternative medicine practice and is in the practice with a compounding pharmacy that specializes in bioidentical hormone therapy. So she is super qualified to be speaking to us on the very topic of hormone therapies and the formulations, the delivery methods, and all that we're going to talk about. So before we get started, let's read the fancy disclaimer. This information is intended to increase the knowledge base of listeners. So take up this information and all other resources of it with your medical practitioner. So I'm super excited to have on for a second time, and it's a total honor to have Carol Petersen here. Welcome.
Thank you, Zara. It's my pleasure.
So we had a great first episode. We covered so much, and the objective of that episode was to clear the confusion on hormone testing. In your perspective, it was both fascinating and surprising. And if I understood you correctly, and I want to circle back to that episode, I'll put the episode in the show notes so that people can go and listen to it because it was so good. You said, or you explained that testing hormones in this phase of life in perimenopause is really hard, and most testing is inaccurate, and we covered the reasons why. And you also mentioned that women just vary so much in where on the range that they feel good, where they feel free of symptoms of hot flashes, etc. So you said testing is not really necessary, especially before we take hormone therapy. And I kept digging a little deeper with you to try to understand your position on hormone metabolites. And it's ingrained in us those of us who really follow urine testing, that it's essential to make sure that our hormones are going down those safe pathways and not the pro-cancerous pathways. And we're using these words because they're just so like good, bad. And it's not necessarily like that. But if I recall, you did mention that this sort of safe danger thing, pathway business, is just theory and it's not proven. And anyway, if we wanted to cover our bases just in case, we can always do a supplement like NAC or glutathione, calcium D-glucarate, etc.
And DIM is a popular, diindolylmethane is a very popular recommendation
Yes.
at that point, but absolutely inappropriate if it's a low estrogen woman, because now you're knocking out her estrogens and she will feel terrible on the DIM because it decreases aromatase. So you don't get as much testosterone initiated estradiol production. So that can be a real negative with DIM. So it's not across the board everything. And I don't know, I've discovered just in reading a study. So one of the metabolites, 16 alpha hydroxy estrone, is one of these we consider like too stimulating. And I agree, if your metabolism needs to be in a place that's healthy. Yes, we need that hormone. It's very, very good for our bones, but we don't need it in excess. And it was very interesting because I found a little reference that when that hormone is high, it's consistent with hypothyroidism. So the treatment there probably should be iodine and looking at thyroid, and not particularly DIM. So we're going to another level. You don't see the thyroid panel on the urine, so you know nothing about that. And the 4-hydroxy also very stimulating. What's the thing for that? So you want that to be methylated. You don't want it to linger in this very very strong estrogen, and methylation is what's needed to take it to the next step. So you have to evaluate methylation. So it's a clue that you aren't methylating well if it's high. Homocysteine on a basic blood panel is another clue. I'm finding more and more people have been doing the genetic testing for their methylation factors with MTFHR and COMT, and have some idea about their methylation status. And this is actually quite prevalent. They say, some people say up to 40% of the population has methylation problems. So the solution is to add methyl groups. And we get that from the B vitamins that are already methylated. We can get it from a popular supplement for digestion. Betaine hydrochloride is uh, trimethylglycine is its other name. So you got three nice methyl groups, plus you're going to absorb your food better. So that's a big plus. SAMe, which was promoted for mental health things, will methylate. Phosphatidylcholine is one step away from betaine hydrochloride. It turns into betaine. So that's another methylator. So you have to make sure that your body is getting extra methyl groups if you are a sluggish metabolizer. That's the only therapy we know right now. We don't know how to change our genetics. I was at a meeting not too long ago. There was a debate whether homocysteine is adequate to evaluate methylation status or you need the genetic testing. And so we went back and forth and got to no sound conclusions. So it's still up for discussion, but the underlying situation, this methylation isn't occurring very well. And then there's a big problem that we don't even measure is adrenaline. And adrenaline is so tied into the instability of our bodies and our adrenal system. It's probably the provocateur of hot flashes and vasomotor things. It's the main cause, rather than estrogen, of panic, anxiety, suicide, rage. These things are happening, and those men and women both who cannot methylate well cannot detox the surges of adrenaline they put out, so that state becomes chronic, and that's not good. That needs to be addressed. Progesterone, we're back to progesterone again, is a balancer of adrenaline, but so is eating something, because for many times a blood sugar drop is responsible for that surge of adrenaline. So again, if you're testing for hormones, we need to be looking at insulin glucose as primary hormones for us. And now I just want to say another hormone that needs to be measured, and you don't think of it as a hormone, but we make all our hormones from it, cholesterol. And what I have found, to my surprise, like the last 6 clients of mine really having problems with low hormones. They had cholesterol levels down to 120, 130, no statins involved. This is absolutely shocking to me, because now they can't make any hormones. No wonder they are in agony. And unless you have a full blood panel that's including total cholesterol, you can't see that. And this is an issue. This is consistent. These levels are consistent with like autistic kids. It's consistent with an AIDS patient near death. It's not a healthy place to be. And then your liver has to be making that cholesterol. You can try to feed cholesterol, but it's not all that effective. Something's going on with the liver that you can't make it. And we don't really see this on the liver enzyme tests. So I'm a big proponent of, when you're testing hormones, let's test all the hormone systems, not just how many tests are offered out there. Oh, we'll give you estradiol, testosterone, maybe progesterone, maybe not. Maybe the pituitary hormones, LH, FSH, maybe not. So you just get a little piece of the puzzle instead of a really broad spectrum. And this is becoming very, very critical, I think, to ignore the rest of the things that you can test for it and analyze. So that's how I like to get information from the clients I'm working with. I want the whole thing. And
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'm an advocate of that as well. We always think, oh, it's just sex hormones, or we go to the doctor, we have no idea what they're going to test, and usually it's just FSH, maybe LH, and that's about it. But so I just wanted to make sure I understood you correctly, because I said those things you said, but if I understood correctly, that was correct. And but you did mention that it is important to know what the metabolites are. So then, in addition to all the other things to put everything together. So it's just that it's this kind of question. I had Dr. Debbie Rice on the show, and she is works for the Dutch, and I actually gathered all the arguments that we had from our podcast episode, and I threw it at her, and it was the podcast really were critical questions for people who are Dutch fans or dried urine testing fans. And so the question that I have for you then is, if those metabolites are important to look at, among other things, then how do we know is it just through the genetic testing and homocysteine that we can see if we are methylating and we don't need to look at the 2, 4, and 16-OH pathways?
Right. It's there's more than one way to test for these things would be the answer to that. Yes, that'll show
Mhm.
it for you in the Dutch, but also you have other ways to measure this. And you don't particularly need to have the glimpse at that particular hormone. Now, for example, if you do serum and you do saliva and you test for estradiol, you have one estrogen, and floating around your body at any one time is probably 20, 30 estrogens. So we only have a tiny piece of that picture. And so you could have a very low estradiol level in that circumstance, and even in urine. And if you haven't tested all those 20, 30 metabolites, you don't really know your estrogen status. And so you can find, like, indirectly, you can get more ideas. David Rosensweet really likes sex hormone binding globulin, and I do too, because why is it high? It'll get high when you have excess estrogen. It'll get high if there's excess cortisol. So even though you were looking at a test with a low estradiol and you saw that sex hormone binding globulin was high, you already know there's too much estrogen impact on the metabolism of that body. So I consider that a good marker as
Mm.
well.
So these are all blood testing that you're looking at in these extra things to put the piece together, correct?
It could be saliva. You can
Hmm.
use saliva as a, I don't
Like
care for
cortisol.
saliva. Yeah, I
Mm.
don't care for saliva as something to monitor your treatment. But when you're not using anything at all, if you can get lots of points, then you can start to get a picture from that too. But again, it's limited, like I said, by what are you testing? Are you testing some adrenal hormones and the sex hormones? And we don't know the whole picture of the insulin, glucose, thyroid, all the pituitary hormones. What's going on there? So we just don't know. So the tests are helpful, but you have to realize that even serum, of course, has its limitations. So you're limited by what the tests can provide for you. So if you don't test for it, you're not going to see it, right? So
Mhm.
you're not going to see that this woman's insulin resistance, and that's probably underlying everything. And if you look at that and start looking into what they're eating, you'll find maybe a lot of the symptoms that are going on could be mitigated by diet changes, not by a hormone. So
Mhm.
it's a little
Yeah.
complicated, but it's fascinating and completely doable to check into a broader picture and really make a big difference in somebody's quality of life. So that excites me
Mm.
that we can do that.
Yeah, and I actually, I always say you can't out hormone a bad diet and lifestyle. That's true. It certainly can help. I feel like it's like a supplement. It's like you top up, if you're deficient, and that will help you along. And so you have better sleep, so you feel more energetic, and you can go to the gym and you can start, if you're exercising, you probably make healthier choices, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good way to go through. But I'm wondering, and I'm also, I mean, I seen the women who just do it all. Their diet's dialed in and everything is great, and they still have the symptoms, and they do really need help. But Yeah. I'm wondering because you are the progesterone queen. Like I love this talk that you did this summit. Let's talk estrogen, and I'll have a link to that where you were on a
Uh,
panel of five other experts in menopause, treating women in menopause for like decades now. All of it, all of you, and so there you were talking a lot about progesterone. In my understanding, so is progesterone isn't really picked up well in blood. And then if we go back to our talk, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, then it's the women in in perimenopause when our hormones are up in the morning and down in the evening, or vice versa. And one day it's like this and that. That's why a lot of doctors are like, who cares? We can't test because it's not
yeah,
that accurate.
yeah.
We don't know the bigger picture. That's why I agree that actually that's maybe the sex hormones, and then but the insulin and the cholesterol and that kind of stuff is probably a little is more stable. But is it true that progesterone isn't picked up really well on blood?
Uh, it's picked up if it's your endogenous progesterone. If you're not treated and that progesterone's low, you're low. That's definitely the case. And you can easily tell if you're in luteal phase or not by the vast difference in the levels of progesterone when you measure. The problem is, and we had a little bit of a controversy lately, the creams, when you put a cream, a topical on your skin, it doesn't show up in the serum very well.
Yeah, that's what I
And
meant.
yet,
Yeah.
yep, your symptoms are alleviated. And so the controversy is, so conventional medicine is saying, well, you have to have luteal levels, the higher levels of progesterone, the second part of the cycle, have to be high enough to ensure that you're not building up the endometrium. However, that's a little wishy-washy too. You can get that with oral progesterone, and that's an FDA approved product. So that's where conventional medicine likes to go. But it doesn't mean that you can't get there with creams. We can't hook it to urine either. We can't hook it to a blood test. Progesterone is such an amazing hormone. It goes all over the place. It's compartmentalized all over the body. So we don't have a comprehensive test to know what progesterone is doing every single moment. And it's easily, in most cases, converting to cortisol as well. So it's off on that pathway. You're not measuring it. Yet, does that mean you can't protect the uterus with topical progesterone? Not at all. Practitioners, in any case, whether you're using oral progesterone or topical or vaginal or rectal or sublingual, I don't care what it is. If you have to know whether that endometrium is protected, you've got to do another test. The test is transvaginal ultrasound, and have a look. And you're going to do that even if you had oral and even if you had luteal phase, because without doing that test too, you haven't confirmed what you thought in the first place, that that blood level is analogous to helping the endometrium. I'm finding, well, this is a big problem. Women in perimenopause often become huge bleeders. And so you're building up a lot of tissue. And bleeding is good. You're getting it out. To mitigate that, you should use more progesterone in the follicular phase. The big adrenal progesterone levels are not being met. So estrogen's overbuilding up the endometrium. If you have enough progesterone there, it doesn't happen. And easily fix these heavy bleeders. Yet in the US, something like 700,000 hysterectomies are done every year, and a large proportion just for heavy bleeding. And now conventional medicine has sort of reached a consensus. Oh, you have a heavy bleeder in your office. Well, we'll put in a Mirena coil. Mirena coil is a progestin. It is not progesterone. Now, for some, it can mitigate bleeding. For others, they just keep on bleeding. And now you have the added assault with a foreign hormone-like substance that really can compromise your health. So it's a big issue too. The heavy bleeders need to know that there's an easy solution, and that word needs to be be
Yeah.
out there. And so doctors in conventional medicine are just not trained about this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you go there for your health advice, realize the limitation of their training.
Yeah.
Doctors need to go far beyond what they learned in medical school to start working on what we know about the endocrine system that's happened since you've gone to medical school. If you don't keep up and don't go to conferences and read the literature, you're not going to know. You're
Yeah.
just so you're going to an expert who is ignorant on some very essential key things. And for a lot of people, and I include men because they have just a hard problem with hormone issues as women do, but they go to their conventional doctors hoping to have some relief of some symptoms, and the doctors are not equipped to help them. And so they're dismissed. If it happens to be mental type things like the anxiety, panic, they'll just put a drug on it
Mm.
rather than say, why is this happening in this particular body at this time? They're not trained to think like that. They're trained to think like, if this system, then that drug, or the drug doesn't work, we'll just cut out the offending organ. But that doesn't solve the imbalance at all.
Yeah. It's true. It seems like there's so much more work that has to be done in training doctors about hormones in general, not just menopausal hormones. And you're right, you're bringing in the men as well. It's not, the solution to everything. I always think, hormones are, because in this space that I'm in, it's just anybody who's listening to me for a while is like, wow, I better get on those hormones because it's like a miracle. And I do is because of all the things that we say can, help with. And it may for some women, but then there are women who go on them and they're like, I still have the problem. Maybe it's heavy metal toxicity, or maybe it's some psychological issue, or so, but I still think that hormones are good to optimize so that you can deal with the root cause. If that's not the root cause, well, then at least it should support finding the root cause. Because if that's out of balance and the other thing's out of balance, then like, wow, let's try to get the whole system together. And hormones is a good place to start. It's kind of an obvious one especially if you're in midlife, whether you're a man or a woman. So I do appreciate that. I do have one question that when you mentioned the Mirena coil, one of our members in our community, we have the Biohacking Menopause membership group, and one of them asked me if we could find out if her Mirena coil, she's 36, so she's on Mirena coil she doesn't want to have a fourth child and she wants it to work, but she hears of all the benefits of progesterone and she wants to take transdermal progesterone in addition to her Mirena coil because of, I think it's sleep, for the sleep benefits. So the question she had was, well, some doctors have told her if you take the transdermal progesterone, then your Mirena coil may not be effective and you put yourself at risk for getting pregnant. What do you think?
So to be a progestin or progestogen, however you want to call it, it has to somehow fit into progesterone receptors and produce an effect or block an effect. And that's the long and short of it in those direct receptor kind of things. And so if you have the Mirena coil, you've got those receptors blocked, and probably at a stronger blockade than the progesterone could be doing right then. It's a problem. The synthetics can be awfully more tightly bound. Now, for your sleep thing, maybe that's mediated through the GABA receptor. Some of the progestins, I don't know about that one, are less brain active. They don't go through the blood-brain barrier. And maybe that little piece of progesterone, you could get that activity there. But I don't know. We tried in the old days, we had the same thought about oral contraceptives because women were symptomatic with those too, and with the symptoms that should be alleviated by progesterone. Can you help with the mood things, the water retention, tender breasts, etc., with using progesterone? We didn't find it very effective. So it was just kind of trial and error on some women. So when you have one drug deliberately blocking receptors and you want to put the progesterone in, how good is that going to work? I don't think very well. I think you have to take it out,
Mm,
use
yeah.
another form of birth control. And why do that? Why are we like we need birth control to poison us? That's we're willing to be poisoned. Choose the barrier methods,
Yeah.
or
Well,
or some-
this goes back to doctors have no problem prescribing this synthetic birth control that is really good for us, but have problems with a natural hormone therapy for women in menopause. Like, to me, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So yeah, so for her, so it's not the fact that her her birth control is not going to work anymore. It's the fact that the transdermal estrogen will probably not work because the receptors are already being blocked by the progestins.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
So
So
I doubt very much she'd lose her birth control effect, but I don't know. You can
I
you can use progesterone as birth control, but it's not reliable.
mm,
Kat Dalton started this idea, and you probably have run into the concept. If you use progesterone in high enough doses every single day, ovulation doesn't occur because your pituitary thinks you're pregnant.
mhm,
And that would be well and good and probably very nice and safe way to do it. But because progesterone is so volatile and needed in so many other places on demand, what amount of progesterone do you need to make sure this always happens? We don't know. So it makes it very unreliable, and you wouldn't want to
mhm.
make that decision and still get pregnant, although your child would be benefiting by the high progesterone that it was exposed to in the mom's body, definitely. So
Oh,
that
interesting.
that's another thing I've just run across, which I find interesting. I don't know the answer, and I don't know who would. I bring this up because we look at the luteal phase levels in the serum, as they were saying with the capsules. And so that might go to 20 or 30 nanograms per mil. So if you're pregnant, to maintain a pregnancy, you have to be at least 50. And in the textbooks, they'll say 50 to 200 for pregnancy levels of progesterone. But now I've seen a lab report where they list progesterone levels for each kind of stage of life, including pregnancy. And I was so astounded. This lab had 50 to 550. And
Yeah, yeah. The ranges can be crazy if you see, depending on which country and which lab, and yeah, which is why
so
it's so hard, right? To say
which,
what's the ideal.
right, that provoked the thought in me that there's probably a sweet spot in there, that if you wanted a very healthy, calm, bright baby, that your progesterone should be at least this high instead of that minimum. But
Mm,
where is that? We don't know. Katarina Dalton did give her severe PMSers progesterone during the whole of their pregnancies, because she was worried about their relationship to progesterone in the first place with the PMS. She then followed through 10 years later and looked at the children of those pregnancies, and they exceeded in everything. They were brighter than their peers, and they did not exceed in sports. So progesterone is so essential to a successful pregnancy. So it bears looking into, like, where is the best level to be, rather than barely pregnant and barely hanging on to that pregnancy. Could we have a better outcome if plenty of progesterone was there?
wow. Interesting. Well, I mentioned this book to you, Dr. Lisa Mosconi, the XX Brain. She just came out with the Menopause Brain. And she had this crazy chart that I shared with you, that the contraindications to hormone therapy for menopause. And there were all these things that were just so stupid, because we know if it's done appropriately, you can give hormone therapy to a woman with some of these contraindications. And on the list is pregnancy, which, I would say, well, yeah, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I'm not dealing with pregnant women, but here you go telling me now, here's a study that was done on pregnant women, giving them high doses of progesterone, and they're
Right.
having this successful outcomes and they're not putting their babies at risk. So yeah, we have to take a lot of things that we hear with a grain of salt, or understand that we are exceptional. And like you said, some of these ranges are so large. I mean, I've seen women with certain, depending on, say, a lower, on the lower end of the spectrum of progesterone, and that's when they're feeling fine and great. And then other ones, like, they're feeling horrible at that level, and they need higher levels of progesterone in their bodies. So again, it just shows that we're all bio-individual, and like you said, those fluctuations. And of course, progesterone is is needed for so many other things in the body, and we only talk about, certain things in menopause, but what about all the other stuff that's going on, right?
Mhm.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And so as you're a compounding pharmacist with literally decades of experience, I wanted to take a deeper dive into the differences between compounded hormones and FDA approved pharmaceutical hormones, because I still meet when you're in this space for a while, you're like, okay, I got it. But when you first start, you've been in this for your life, but when you first start into the menopause, hormone space, and you talk to your doctor about your choices, people are confused. What does compounding mean? What does it mean? Isn't it all the same? So I would love for you to explain this, because this is really your jam.
Okay, so when you apply to the FDA for a drug approval, you have to apply for a disease. Okay, so I'll give the example of Premarin. They applied for vasomotor symptoms and got that approved as an indication. But what really made Premarin uh, blow up like a very popular drug was later they got an indication approval from the FDA, possibly effective for osteoporosis. And when they did that, they did this massive marketing campaign. So everybody who's concerned about their long-term bones needs to be on Premarin because the FDA said it may be effective. However, is that the best therapy for osteoporosis? Is that your best choice? Doctors are still prescribing this stuff. It shows how embedded this ignorance is. And so there are bioidentical hormones that are approved by the FDA. The estrogen patches are estradiol, real estradiol. What they patented, the drug companies cannot patent a natural hormone. What they patented was the delivery system. The patch has the patent, not the hormone.
Hmm.
So doctors who are conventionally trained feel very secure using the FDA approved products. Uh, you can use the same hormone in compounding to restore somebody with low estradiol, to restore them to more normal levels and help them feel good, and their mood is good, their brain is good, their skin is good, their breasts aren't drooping, they're not having vaginal symptoms or leaky bladders. All of this is adequate estrogen. And that's pretty much how you measure your success. Have all these things gone away or not? Uh, with compounding, you can use various dosage forms: creams, gels, oral, vaginal inserts, suppositories. We used to make a rectal solution of progesterone for PMS. It can be injected. They're pellets. You have all these things that can be used to deliver the hormone. The hormone does what the hormone does. The FDA can't make it not do it, right? Just because they didn't approve it. However, only the FDA is allowed to use the words safe and effective. It doesn't necessarily mean, as we look at the history of what the FDA has put allowed on the market, that that's really a true phrase, but only they can use it. So it's kind of used against compounding, because realize these groups are organizing to disparage compounding in favor of their manufactured drugs. So they'll say not safe and effective, yet it's the same hormone. And compounding gives you enormous latitude to be able to individualize a therapy for women. Here's another example. There's no FDA approved product for testosterone in the United States. There have been a couple of companies wanted to get a gel and a patch type delivery system authorized. There's huge scientific literature on this, particularly coming from Australia. Susan Davis, big body of knowledge, how beneficial it is for women. And in fact, progesterone is your major hormone. The next biggest, as far as quantity of sex hormones in your body, is testosterone. So we have a huge ignorance about treating women with testosterone. You remove a woman's ovaries, half her testosterone's gone. And she's going to feel that. And her body's going to start to really fall apart. She can't build muscle mass. She can't build bones. She can't build her immune system. It's horrific. Yet we can do this. And compounding is quite prevalently putting back testosterone, or some of the conventional doctors are even leaning toward, there's some men's approved products. So giving smaller doses of the product made for men off label to women has been done. Then we have another category that you haven't mentioned, is over-the-counter hormones.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, you're right. That is another kind. And just to clarify, for some people are still not sure, compounding means that you have your own formula made in a laboratory. The doctor has to make a prescription, and it could be exactly the same as what you find in the pharmacy, but prescribed, FDA approved, etc. But perhaps made with organic oils or made with something else instead of, I don't know, carbopols or whatever chemicals that come
Right,
in the
right.
gels as well. So
Different carriers.
yeah, so they're sort of made in a lab for you versus what you go pick up from a pharmacy. And then you're right. Then there is the over the counter. And I always forget that, yes, of course, we can buy hormones over the counter too. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's actually quite empowering, because what it's bringing is I think hormones do need a little bit of coaching. And they're certainly well-informed consumers. I've run into some of the smartest women I've ever met, and they've put their attention on this, and their education and they're highly motivated because it's for them. Their knowledge base vastly exceeds any medical practitioner. So we have that kind of consumer, and we also have mid-level practitioners like naturopaths in most states can't prescribe compounding, but they could guide somebody with using over-the-counter hormones, chiropractors, health coaches, massage therapists. The list is endless. So as this group of people become more interested in hormones and make sure that they understand what they're doing, it's another good army out there to help us solve the hormone imbalance problems that we're encountering. So I'm very excited about doing this. So we can't get testosterone over the counter. In women, you can get DHEA to make you more testosterone. That's not 100% reliable, but that's something you might check. When you take DHEA, look to see if your testosterone levels and your estrogen levels increase from that. They're downline from the DHEA. You can get progesterone, you can get estradiol, you can get estriol, you can get pregnenolone. So you can get melatonin. I mean, you can get vitamin D, it's also a hormone. You can get all this
Without a prescription. You can
without
get
a
it on Amazon.
right.
I mean, it's amazing. This whole world opens up and you're like, I need a doctor. But actually you don't need a doctor, but I wouldn't recommend doing this just on your own like you. But the concern that I have, and that doctors always throw out at me, who are very pro FDA approved only. They don't like the compounded stuff. Their argument is it's not approved. We don't know really what's in the formula. We don't know how effective it's going to be on the woman, but we don't know effective FDA approved
Right.
can be on a woman anyways, but that's another argument. But then, then the next level is the over the counter stuff, because as I understand, the compounding pharmacies formula that's say biased or estradiol is made whatever just for you, but it's not checked for efficacy and safety. But the compounding lab is FDA approved, isn't it?
No, no, no. It has license, just like um, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, pharmacies also have to have licenses. And it might surprise you to learn, because we have US Pharmacopoeia, which has a lot of guidances for compounding, huge number, and all of the states embrace adhering to those standards as part of their Practice Act. It might surprise you to know that it's often that compounders are held to a higher standard than the manufacturer is.
Why?
Um,
How?
how we have a limit, like you have to be able to demonstrate that with your stated dose on the label that your compounded product is plus or minus 10% of that. When we look at, for instance, levothyroxine. So FDA has approved that, but they allow something like 30% plus or minus.
What?
Yes. So
Wow.
it does not, FDA does not guarantee that the quality there is there either. And how many times has the FDA actually done an inspection and does big drug recalls because the company has not met the standards that they needed to? It's huge. This is happening more often than with the compounding pharmacies. And over the years, I've 30 years in this field now. What we did 30 years ago was not as regulated, not but we still use basically the same equipment. You have to have absolutely spot on weights and measures. Even the local governments get into that act. They'll come to your pharmacy and check your weights and measures and give
Is
you
that
license.
normal? Is that kind of across the board, or is that
I
just
think
a
that's pretty
few?
normal. Most states have that kind of thing, that the equipment you use for measuring is under state control, and they'll come in and inspect you.
Are there state approved compounding laboratories and sorry, there's FDA approved compounding pharmacies and some that are not FDA approved? Does
So,
that exist?
so the FDA created this other sort of like a quasi-manufacturing situation. You don't have to be a pharmacy. They call it outsourcing. And there's only a handful, maybe 30 businesses have done this. For the most part, the state requires that this facility also be licensed by them as a pharmacy, but they're allowed to do a few select compounds and only that, but they can do it in bigger amounts. And they're allowed to supply office supply to practitioners, and really and truly, like, other pharmacies could buy those products from that outsourcing facility. So it's
Hmm.
another kind of quasi level that is FDA approved, sanctioned. The FDA does inspect. Well, FDA does inspect pharmacies too. The FDA, hands down, has the authority to make sure that the substances being used in the United States across the board, whether it's in the OTC products, the pharmacy compounding, or its manufacturing, they're in charge of the quality of the drug raw material, hands down. So any facility where these things are stored, even warehouse situations, the FDA can go in and inspect and require that these are tested for quality before you can use any of these substances like progesterone. You have to get a certificate of analysis from the manufacturer. And many pharmacies also will repeat that testing just to ensure that there was no hanky-panky in the chain. I remember once we had ordered some estriol, and we had that double checked because estriol was a hot button, and it came in like 91% pure. So you don't know what the other 9% is. You have to have 99.9 something to be able to use it in the first place. Anything less, you have to reject.
Mm.
That's the state of the art.
It, is that across the board, all pharmacies in the US, you're saying? Oh, and also what about Canada? All this stuff we're talking about is very US centric, but I'm wondering if Canada and Europe, I don't even want to ask. But what if you do know, let us know.
Okay, well, I can say a little bit about Canada. It's sort of they follow what's going on in the US, particularly what the FDA does. So their compounding rules are very similar to what's happening in the
Mm.
US.
Okay, so you're saying across the board, all pharmacies need to be adhered to these restrictions where the the ingredient itself has to be 99.9% approved and or proven or with some testing
Right,
that
right.
maybe not the actual product that you come up with, but the actual ingredient is
Right,
strictly
right.
regulated.
And then further, if you're compounding, you have to have documentation and outside testing. Compounds are getting more and more expensive because of all this outside testing. What you have to ensure is that your process produces a uniform result all the time. Okay, so consequently, we have things in the compounding lab where you measure, let's say you measured out the amount of progesterone you needed to make a 2-ounce cream or a whole batch of it. You measure it out. You have to have your calculations. You also have to have your weights when you checked it and measured it. The balances even spit out receipts. So you have continuous documentation that that weight was there. And to insinuate that that kind of thing does not happen, which is the
Yes, that's the argument people have. It's not regulated. We don't know what's happening in there. Wow,
it's
it sounds pretty intense to
it's
me.
it's pretty intensely regulated. And so just because somebody says it isn't, that's as like uh it's a lie. It's an out and out lie. And I bet those people who are saying it and continuing that narrative have never been inside a compounding pharmacy.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to go visit one day. I'm wondering when we're talking about compounding pharmacies generally a broad sense of the term or pharmacies in your world, you're in this world for 30 years. Is it like there are good doctors and bad doctors, good factories that good products and factories that make bad products? Is there variability here as well that maybe, and then the question is because if a woman is thinking, oh yeah, I want to go compounding pharmacy, but maybe she should be checking which is the best compounding pharmacy.
Okay, it would be questionable because it's hard to tell. So much let's say creams. So you can have any number of creams being used as a base, and you can have variable absorption with that cream base. Plus, you have variable absorption with the skin of the patient. That's a big factor in there too. So if you had a cream compounded by one pharmacy and decided to go to another pharmacy and they gave you a different base, you definitely could see a difference in the two because they haven't used the same base. And that's across the board. That is also involved sometimes with the FDA approved generics. they're using a different base with a different company for the same active ingredient than the brand name did. Doesn't occur all the time, but it does occur. So you don't know till you use it and somebody monitors your use. So is that particularly a negative? I don't think so. But does it make one pharmacy better than the other? No, they have to have that amount of hormone in your product, in that dosage form, whatever it is. How it's absorbed in that end patient is a variable, and you can't control that.
Yeah. And I'm
You asked
wondering,
the second part of this question. I want to address that. Was
yes,
what about the practitioners? So I started looking at Facebook because what I was looking for was the interaction with people and what they were doing out there. And really, practitioners, even those who think that they're the best ever hormone prescribing doctors ever, they should look there because they'll find their failures there. And how many women have I seen? They go to dozens of doctors sometimes and do not get relief. And so even some very famous people and whatnot, they have failures. And so what's missing? I'll tell you what's missing. The patient contact and really paying significant attention to the symptoms that are relieved or still are out there, or anything newly emerged. That little piece is missing. This really good follow-up. Too many doctors will see somebody and put them on something, see them in 3 months, 6 months. No, I used to recommend to people that always demand 100%. This is in our culture, we take these drugs and we complain that we have side effects and issues and problems not solved. And doctors are sort of trained to tell you to live with it. You're gonna
you're
and
getting
this is
old. That's normal.
yeah, this is not acceptable with topping off your hormones. Demand complete relief. And so if you're not completely there, go back to your practitioner and say, I'm 80% better, but I want the other 20%. How do I need to change what I'm doing to get there? And it's
Yeah.
doable, and you should have it. And I think we need to be louder consumers. Of course, you run the risk of the doctor not wanting to see you, but just
And you gotta find another doctor. I want to address the other third component that we didn't, you'd mentioned the over-the-counter stuff, finding progesterone on Amazon. What are the risks there? And because you kind of make clear compounding is pretty high, very high standard, and they're not even at the same, this FDA approved is not having the same standardization as a compounding pharmacy, which was really surprising to me. But what about what happens when a woman says, I'm going to just get my progesterone on some influencer's website or Amazon over the counter?
okay, so we still run the problem of, yes, there can be bad actors, and the stuff is not in there as claimed. And in the case of progesterone, we've got many products that have little doses of progesterone, like 15, 16 milligrams a dose, 20 milligrams. This can be an absolute disaster for a woman who needs a lot of progesterone. It will make her feel worse, and a lot worse. So in part, I think those products have an element of danger. And I've said this for a long time. I put this past a few doctors. They were thinking I was out of it, but I said, this is a dangerous area. Like, all the symptoms increase. The estrogen related things are worsened, and you're not going to get relief from that, and puts you really in a bad zone, worse than nothing at all. To be in this undertreated zone, I believe that if you left yourself, that's a huge problem. Back when so Women's International Pharmacy was compounding progesterone for severe PMS. And along comes Dr. Whitaker, who had a newsletter, and he had a broad audience. So what does he write about? He wrote about the product Progest, which has 16 milligrams of progesterone in it. And it may be what he used in his osteoporosis study even. So it had this little bit of progesterone. And he also mentioned Women's International Pharmacy as compounding hormones and a source for Progest. Ironically, we didn't have Progest when when that came out. So we quickly got it, and women were buying it through us because of that newsletter. But they would call back with really some of these severe issues with not enough progesterone. So we knew that was easily fixed with more progesterone and lots of progesterone because we were doing it with the PMS women.
Mhm.
And so we were able to say, you just simply need to have more progesterone, and you can talk to your practitioner about this, and maybe we can get this solved. I heard a lecture by John Lee one time, and he acknowledged this actually, that women were feeling worse. And he goes, no matter, just keep doing it for 9 months and it'll all resolve. And
Yes, I heard
I,
this story. It's ridiculous. Just
you
pull up
get
your
shame.
socks. It's like the Lancet article that just came out, and I've talked a lot about with every guest I have. We're talking about it, the balanced conversation about menopause. And there was a did you read this or hear about it?
No,
Okay, it was
no.
you can skip it. But basically some woman put it replaced the word menopause with the word erectile dysfunction. And it was like, oh, just go take a walk and your erectile dysfunction, just who you don't need sex, really? Come on. I mean, it was just it sounded ridiculous,
Okay.
but that's what's happening. Just replace the word, and this is exactly what you're saying. I'll just, 9 months, a year, just it'll pass. But during that time, you feel like crap.
And I think you actually are damaging your body, which I have
Yeah.
a big issue with that. And so we knew that could be resolved in hours. We called it breakthrough when it happened to a PMS patient. We and their doctors were prescribing. They might be using the oral capsules in oil, which is what we started with, but we had uh, uh, subvaginally rectal solutions, as I mentioned before, sublinguals, and so the women would have extra progesterone to use when those symptoms were coming up again. And this is how life works. We're not static. You're not a one capsule 4 times a day from here to eternity. Life is variable. So you have different stresses and things go on differently as you age. Your contribution, if you're topping off hormones, your contribution may be going down and you need more in the second decade of your using it than you did the first, just to get to the same place. You have to address the individuality of every single person where that's going on. And practitioners are, sadly, too many practices are designed for your practitioner to look at a computer form to fill out your visit and may not even look at you. And that's another thing. Doctors are not trained to look at you anymore. You can see hormone deficits in people as you become the observer and know what's going on. So if they only took the time to learn the physical signs of hormone depletions in the various hormones, they could do a much better job, but they don't. Absolutely don't, because they don't have the time built into their business model, which is really sad. So that's in part why I'm really happy this whole nother league of professionals who could be coaches with hormones is emerging. I think is very exciting because they will take the time.
They have to. And to reiterate what you just said about you could be doing more damage by just sweating it out, waiting for time to pass. I'm a prime example. I started hormone therapy when I was 50. I'm now 53. And I did the Dutch testing, check the metabolites, how I check because I didn't have symptoms. So I was like, okay, we'll just take, and what I've been given is baby doses. I'm like, well, okay, whatever. every time I test. I mean, it didn't matter. Like I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning. And the doctors just said, okay, well, let's start with these doses. And they were really big. Now that I know, now I didn't know back then, baby doses. And every time I would test, which was once a year because Dutch is so expensive, I wasn't absorbing it. So here we are, year after year. Let's change from a spray to a gel to an oral. And I just took a bone density scan at 53. The last one I was at 50. I don't know why the doctors didn't tell me or remind me we had COVID and all that, but still should have should have thought better. I just took one a couple weeks ago and I have a spine in osteopenia. And I'm like, I can't believe this. I've been taking hormones for the last 3 years. So not, thinking I'm protected and everything's fine and dandy. And I'm an active person. So I'm doing, and I'm doing all the other work. And here I am going, shoot, I was too scared. And maybe nobody knew, or the doctor wasn't trained enough, or didn't ask me to take. And I am telling every woman now, every year, you got to take your bone density scan. And goes back to what you said about it's not only about testing your hormones,
Mhm.
right? So
That's right.
here I am, somebody who should know better, with working with doctors who should know better, and I'm still in this position. So I'm going to reverse that, and you can just watch that happen.
Oh, easily done. Dr. Jerry Lynn Pryor is a really lovely resource. She's at semcor.ca. She studied osteoporosis and particularly was actually seeing it happen in young athletic women. They overtrain and their hormones go, psh, they stop their cycle, so no progesterone.
Mhm.
So for peri and menopause, she does a minimum of 300 milligrams progesterone orally. Now she's not in a position with her academic stuff at the University of British Columbia to be using all these other compounded alternatives. And she probably loved to have that, but she's got her little piece there. So why are we putting women, and this is really common, 100 milligram, 200 milligram progesterone, when if your goal is to have a healthy body, you need a lot more than that uh, to um, to achieve what you want. And I have seen women reverse bone loss with progesterone, and I'd add testosterone and DHEA and a little bit of estrogen. Everything that is missing should be there.
Mm, thank
And
you. Yeah.
vitamin D. Don't forget
Yeah.
vitamin
And vitamin
D.
D.
You need calcium and K and A. Uh, it's it's a
Yeah.
simple and the whole thing needs to be looked at. And even in that, we still have limited knowledge of our physiology. There's things
Mhm.
that still get discovered, like new body parts or whatever, like still being
Like a
discovered.
new hormones that we didn't know they existed.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, so we're doing a great podcast with Dr. Doug Lucas coming up. His jam is osteoporosis. That's his business. He's a functional medicine doctor, but just so focused on that. And so we're having him on again because he says he's taken a real deep dive into testosterone and how important that is for women going through menopause, and to save their bones as well. So that'll be a super interesting conversation. And ladies who are listening now, you'll just have to wait for that to happen. But I can't wait to hear. But hormones, hormones, hormones. My gosh, I never thought I'd be getting into this world, but here I am, and it's so important. So I have still I only went through 2 or 3 questions, and I have more, but I'm gonna have to cut you off because we just ran out of time. But I want to continue this conversation. I want to talk to you more about the formulas of the actual base of all these gels and creams and lotions that we're flowing all over our body. Like, we know that only 0.3, so 3% of that is actual hormone, and what's the other 97% of it is something else.
Very important, very important.
Yeah. So we'll
Yeah.
dive into that. I want to know more about progesterone and a little bit more about your thoughts on stopping all hormones and putting them back on. Everybody has their own way. Some like to cycle, but we're going to save that for next time because I could go on forever with you. We have to stop. So before I let you go, I want to ask you, we were talking about an event that's coming up, or if there's anything else that we should know about in the pipeline.
This is coming up at the end of April, and I've been asked to contribute with Dr. Lindsay Berkson, Dr. David Brownstein are carrying the load, but I'm going to do the progesterone piece. Dr. Lindsay says, "Don't talk about estrogen, that's mine." So I will get you the link for this. It's going to be a full 2-day seminar with
Wow.
for practitioners. There'll be CME involved in there too.
Oh,
So
credits for
yeah,
health practitioners. That's amazing. So that's a paid event or free?
it's a paid event.
And it's 2 days, and we can get replays, I'm assuming too, if
Yeah, I
we,
imagine you can buy it afterwards,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah,
in case you can't make it.
two really packed days of
Oh,
information.
share that link with me. I'll put it in the show notes. I'm going to be there. I'm signing up already. It's just there's so much to learn, and I see this space evolving and evolving, and what we knew back then has changed, and it just keeps. I think we need to always stay on our toes when it comes to this menopause hormone space. So I also will have links to your website, the Wellness by Design Project.com. You got a great blog. You have the podcast, you've got the YouTube channel, Facebook, and also your email in case anybody wants to reach out to you. Is there anywhere else that I've missed where people can find
Yeah,
you?
that's it. That's
Oh,
I
great.
might be branching out. I'm trying to women and men need this information. We have
Yes.
systematically been eliminated or left out of knowing how our bodies work.
Yeah.
And that's a real sad thing. So
Y-
um the
Yeah.
hormone piece is a really important one, very impactful, but there's so much more. And we need to have that information. It should have been taught to us in utero. Actually, our moms should have
Yeah. Yeah. Shame on
known.
you, mom. But we'll be better moms this time, or
Yes,
well, at least our offspring will.
yeah, and it's happening, it definitely
Yeah.
is happening.
So you should have a membership community where we can share all this stuff. I encourage you to do that. We have ours. I would love to invite you for a Q&A if you're free, because this is a special group of women who have so many questions. And if you're open to that, I'd love to invite you for that too.
Oh, I'd be happy to do it.
Oh, great. So before I let you go, do you have any last words for a woman going through the menopause transition?
Yes, don't settle. If you're not getting the answers you need where you've looked, keep looking because like the what was it, the space show, The Truth Is Out There, or the X-Files or something. The truth is out there. It's not all truth. You're gonna get snagged into the chemicals, the altered hormones. Please be aware and take that into consideration when you're looking at what you're looking, but it's out there. Keep looking.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, have a wonderful day, and I will see you for part 3.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it.